Dearborn, just in South Carolina. They took 4 counties in South Carolina and told people kill all you want. The next year, the does had triplets, every one of them. You're never going to get rid of it.
Well, at least we could thin the herd a little bit. I said, at least we could thin the herd a little bit. Good morning. Glad to see everybody here this morning. We're studying in the 18th chapter of Joshua. And last week we read the first verse. That's about all we did on it. So we're going to pick up with the first verse. What's going on here is we're kind of in the process of assigning the land to different tribes. We've got 3 tribes pretty much taken care of. That's on the other side, or on the other side of Jordan. And now Joshua's going to take a little break here, and he's going to relocate the tabernacle. And that's what we're going to talk about here first, and we'll go into breaking up the land itself. So before we go any further, I'd like for Kevin Cleveland, if you would, to lead our minds in prayer. All right, let's look at verse 1. It says, "And all the congregation of the sons of Israel gathered at Shiloh, and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there, and the land was subdued before them." So pretty much the time frame here we're talking about is the tribe of Ephraim had just received their inheritance. And Joshua pretty much commanded the whole congregation to assemble at Shiloh, and they were going to move the tabernacle to Shiloh. And because this was a land that they had conquered, and pretty much it was a safe situation. And once the tabernacle was set up, it shouldn't be in any kind of danger. Because Joshua realized that for the last 7 years or so, they'd been moving around quite a bit. There was a lot of different things going on, and probably they weren't worshiping the Lord in accordance with the law, just based on the situation that they were in. And he wisely decided it was time for them to set the tabernacle up properly and, get back to the worship, and kind of move the tabernacle more into a central location. And this location was picked because it was a safe location. The Canaanites in the area had been completely subdued, and there was basically no longer any type of resistance from the Canaanites. Now, the location here that we're talking about is about 15 miles from Jerusalem, and it's in the area that was assigned to the tribe of Israel, or the tribe of Ephraim. And it was kind of in the center, so it was kind of an equal distance for everybody to travel. Now, the selection of Shiloh as the site for the sanctuary was hardly an occasion by the fitness of the place, because really it wasn't a great physical location. It was kind of in the mountains, and it was going to take a little bit of effort to get to it, but it was kind of in the center, and it was the location was there. Now, I think one of the reasons that maybe this was picked, if you go back to Genesis 49 and 10, it says, "The sepulchre shall not depart from Judah, nor the lawgiver between his feet, until Shiloh come, and the obedience of the people to him." So it was kind of prophesied and put in the mind probably of Joshua that this was a site that it should be, based on the prophecy there in Genesis. So it was eminently suitable for a resting place and sanctuary, and that's what Shiloh means is rest or sanctuary. So this was a good place for the tabernacle to set up. Now, before it had been set up there at Gilgad, where that was kind of the base of operations, and it resided there for about 7 years. Now, once the tabernacle was moved there to Shiloh, the Ark of the Covenant remained there about 131 years. So this was a better situation all the way around. And once it got there, 131 years is a pretty good period of time to for the tabernacle to be there with the Ark of the Covenant. And also, it's pretty much surrounded by the Israelites, and they had good possession of the land. Comments about that verse? Okay, let's move on to verse 2. And there remained among the sons of Israel 7 tribes which had not received their inheritance. So up to this point, some of the tribes had gotten their inheritance. Some of them actually, before they crossed the River Jordan over here, and now we're starting to move over to the other side. Ephraim had been established, and Judah had been established, but that left Benjamin and Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan to receive their inheritance. And if you'll remember, we talked about this before, that this was being done by lot. There was basically one draw for the tribe and one draw from the location that that they were going to get. So this situation here happened when the children of Israel were there at Shiloh, and it can be reasonably assumed that this meeting that we're going to talk about here actually probably took place either in the tabernacle or in the door of the tabernacle, because that seemed to be the meeting place. So now that we've got the tabernacle reestablished and everything is right, we're going to go back to the business at hand of casting the lots, drawing the lots, however you want to say, and commencing with fixing the locations for the rest of the tribes. So Joshua is going to run into a little problem here that I don't know if he anticipated or not, but it's kind of a human nature type thing. Up to this point, everything had pretty much gone the children of Israel's way. Some of the tribes had already received their inheritance, so you had a whole bunch of them were just kind of still milling around, and everything was good. They had food in their belly, they had water to drink. They were living the good life, and they got a little bit lazy. So Joshua was going to have to deal with this and get them back focused to possessing the rest of the land. So that's what we're going to kind of see here, is back to the business of dividing up the land. We've taken care of the spiritual part. Now we're going to have to go back and take care of the spiritual part. And I pretty much believe that the tribes that were left, they knew what they were going to be in for, because they had seen what had happened with the other tribes possessing the land. They fought all these battles to generally take over the area, but now when they go into a specific area, they may have to clean out the Canaanites a little bit, which means they were going to have to put forth a little bit of effort. Comments about that verse? All right, let's move on to verse 3. And Joshua said to the sons of Israel, how long will you fail to go in to possess the land which Jehovah, the God of your fathers, has given you? So now we see here that Joshua is questioning these tribes and saying, you give an account to me now why you haven't gone and done what you're supposed to do. This inheritance is out there for you, and you're still laying around here around the camp and not doing anything. So, they understood that, when they went out and did these things, God was going to be with them, but still, they were going to have to put forth a little bit of effort to do this. So Joshua is trying to stir them from their inactivity. He's getting them, in a mindset to prepare them to do the work at hand, to probably prepare to go out to battle. Remind them and make them confident in the things that God has given them, and making sure that they remember that God's on their side as long as they do the things that God tells them to do. And he also tells them it's going to take a little bit of labor to conquer these areas. Comments about that verse? All right, let's move on to verse 4. Give from among you 3 men for each tribe, and I will send them, and they shall rise and go through the land and map it according to the inheritance of them, and they shall come unto me. So basically, what we see here is that Joshua is going to send out some spies, and not necessarily spies. These are people that are going out, and they're going to map the land. And he charges each one of the tribes to send 3 people to go and perform this for their particular tribe. Now you'll notice here that Joshua didn't name the people that he wanted to come. He basically put this on the elders of the tribe to pick the people that they want to send out there. Now, this is a pretty shrewd thing for Joshua to do. And from a leadership standpoint, it's a really smart thing to do. Because what he's doing there, if he would have picked the people, it would have kind of come down from the top. But by letting the tribes pick their own people that they have confidence in, they're going to have some buy-in in the deal. So since they've got this buy-in, they're going to be a little bit more enthusiastic about doing the job, because their reputations are going to pretty much be on what they did. And you get that buy-in with people, and they're going to to do a whole lot better job. Plus, the leaders of the tribes knew their people a whole lot better than Joshua did. Now, when you think about this, these are going to have to be some pretty sharp people, because they're going to have to go out, and it's said in there that they're going to have to map the land. So they're going to have to know about geometry. They're going to have to know about geography. They're going to have to know a little bit about food supplies and water supplies, and all the different things that are needed for the for the subsistence of their people. So they're not sending out a bunch of dummies. They're going to have to send out some people that are pretty sharp. So likely these 21 men that were appointed were pretty sharp people. The other thing in there was quite a bit of speculation among the commentators about this group that was sent. There were several of the commentators that said that there was probably more than just the 21 that were sent out, that they would have to have some support people. A couple of the commentators said that they were maybe sent out with some military guards, some soldiers, to protect them while they were doing it, because they were going to be going into some land that there was still going to be some resistance. And by that time, the Canaanites knew what the Israelites were up to, and there could be some resistance to these parties that they were going out there. So they're going to have to go out and do a job that was a little bit dangerous, but it also is a pretty technical type of job. So really, they're out there, and they're going to be out dividing this land that's left over into the 7 parts. And you can also see, I think, a little bit of providence of God in there, that they're going to the proper areas, and given the tools that they need to do the job. So it's a big task, and there was a time frame that that they had to get it done in. So they were out there doing the dimensions, dividing it into the parts, and keeping in mind that the tribe of Levi wasn't going to receive an inheritance, that their inheritance was their priestship. Any comments about that verse?
I guess when he sent them out, they had known borders. You can go this far in this direction, and you can go this far in that direction. They had to have some kind of parameters.
Oh, absolutely. There were some parameters. Joshua, I think, had it was revealed to him what the different areas were going to be, and he said, "You go here, you go there, and whatever." I think absolutely that had to be that way.
Delegating the job of mapping and surveying was really smart, because you mentioned the fact that they got a little bit lazy. They kind of fallen back on and just let other people do the job, but putting the responsibility in their hands, you motivate people.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right, let's look at verse 5. And they shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall stay within their border on the south, and the house of Joseph shall stay within their borders on the north. So Joshua does not mean that the tribes of Judah, occupied the south, and the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh on the north. He gave them some parameters, like we just talked about. So they were going to have to move out and go to the areas that they were to assign. So they were going to go and examine the land to make sure what they were going to be possessing, and he told them not to take into consideration what Judah had unless they were sent through that land to get to their part. Comments about that verse? All right, let's look at verses 6 and 7. And you shall map the land into 7 parts and bring it here to me, so that I may cast lots here for you before Jehovah our God. But the Levites have no part among you, for the priesthood of Jehovah is their inheritance. And Gad and Reuben and half of Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond Jordan on the east, which Moses, the servant of Jehovah, gave them. So he gets this group together, and what we see here in verses 6 and 7 is he gives them their charge. He explains to them what they were doing, and I would suspect that he explained it to them in great detail. And he tells them that they're going to divide the land into 7 parts, and he gave them basically their general orders to where to go, where not to go, and how to divide the land up. And what they were supposed to do were they were supposed to bring a description of the land back to Joshua, and not necessarily by word of mouth, but by written in a book, marked out on a map, and kind of laid out before him. So you can't trust this stuff to memory. So you've got some people out there that do have some type of mapping skills, and we don't think about anything like this today because we have surveyors and we're familiar with maps and things like this. This is history making stuff right here. You look back in history, and people talk about different things that happened, and we don't think that much about it. But at the time that it happened, it was a really big deal. This was a really big deal here, and this was really the first recorded mapping of the earth, or of an area that was described up to this point. It really hadn't been put down in writing. It was just kind of a general pass it from person to person. This is a really big deal. And we also see that God is going to play his part in this deal when they get back to the point of casting the lots. So that just the people go out, they do their surveys, they gather all their information, they come back to Joshua, and they lay all the things out, and then we get back to the situation where we're going to be casting lots for the different areas. Comments about that verse or verses? Okay, let's look at verse 8. And the men arose and went away, and Joshua charged those who went to map the land, saying, Go and walk through the land and map it, and come again to me, so that I may cast lots for you before Jehovah in Shiloh. So the 7 tribes took the advice of Joshua. They chose their 3 men from their tribe and presented them to Joshua, and he gave them their commission, and he sent them out in the land of Canaan to do what was necessary to do it. He didn't talk to them about subduing the land. He talked about mapping and getting a description of the land. So, common sense would tell you that a small group of maybe 3 to maybe 5, 6 people are not going to be able to do any type of possessing of anything. They're just going out and looking the situation over and bringing back details of the survey that they're doing. So they're not only surveying the quality or the quantity of the land, but they're also surveying the quantity of the land. And they've got to make sure that each one of these areas that's picked for the different tribes have got all the things that the tribes are going to need to subsist. They've got to have water. They've got to have place for their cattle to graze. They've got to have place to plant crops. And, it might take a larger section of one part or a smaller section of another to accomplish all these, objectives. And these men who were sent out, they had to have a good understanding of that. And they also had to have an understanding of the size of the tribe that they've got versus the land that tribe is going to need. Just because it's got all those things it's needed, if there's not enough of it for the tribe, then it's going to be insufficient. I mean, this was a pretty daunting job for a group of people to do. And you'll notice that they said walk. They didn't have four-wheelers. They didn't have trucks or anything like that. This is a walking deal. So it's going to take some time to do it, and there's going to be some pretty intense labor because some of these are mountainous areas, some of them are desert areas, things along that line. So it's going to be a pretty good job to do, and then they're going to have to come back and make their report. And as soon as all this is done, then before the Lord at Shiloh, the tribes are going to gather together and they're going to cast their lots. Comments about that verse? Okay, let's look at. Right. Right.
They probably could have used chariots.
Right.
For donkeys or horseback.
Right.
But walking, something they were learning how to do.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder, where did the people that I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Where did they learn these skills? Where they were wandering in the wilderness all these years. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to verse 9. And the men went and passed through the land and mapped it by cities into 7 parts in a book, and they came to Joshua to the host at Shiloh. So it seems that this was the first act of surveying that there is a record of, and these men and their work differed widely because of the different areas that they were being sent to. And they probably discovered things that they didn't expect, or they found they didn't find things that they did expect to have. So I mean, it was a learning situation for everybody. And this in these geological surveys, when you do these things, you find a lot of interesting things. So we may suppose that the country was exactly as described in the book or the map, and pointed out to give them a good idea of what the country actually looked like. So they had points of reference, and then they probably had notes of what was around those points of where the water supplies were, where the wadis were, things along that line. So we had to have some people here who were skilled in geometry, and this kind of comes back to where did they learn these things? Now, Josephus does a little bit of writing on this, and he says that Joshua added to them some that understood geometry, but doubtless the person in each tribe that chose these people knew well what these people were versed in. So, the ancient Greeks, they kind of prided themselves on their ability to do, surveying and things along that line. And several of them, claim that, that's where a lot of this stuff started. Well, this was done long before the ancient Greeks. Probably where they learned to do this was actually in Egypt, because Egypt had a very detailed way of dividing up their country. And it's kind of like, we've got the country, we've got the state, we've got the county, we've got the city. Egypt was divided up that way a lot for taxing purposes and for some other things. So apparently, this was passed down through the families from what they had learned in Egypt. Because if you'll remember, there wasn't anybody that lived in Egypt that was still around other than Joshua and Caleb. The rest of them had all died off. So obviously, somewhere down along the line, the education had continued even through the wilderness, so that these men had the ability to do the job. Now, Josephus also says in his writing that this task took about 7 months to do, and so to do that type of work on foot, obviously they were sent to specific areas to do the job, and it did take a little bit of time to do it. 7 months is a pretty good period of time. Comments about that verse?
It seems like they went out here and saw this land. I'm sure they saw this big fertile valley here and this tribe. So I like to have this. So they didn't know they got back to cast lots.
Right.
God told them where it's going to be.
Yeah.
When they cast their lots.
And they might not have received the land that they surveyed.
Well, they might have received the mountain.
There's no guarantee that they were going to get the land they surveyed out there. The lots determined pecking order.
Right. So I mean that made it, I'm sure, made for some interesting conversations along the deal. All right, let's look at verse 10. And Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before Jehovah, and Joshua divided the land to the sons of Israel there according to their divisions. So Joshua gets all the information. I'm sure that he had some discussions about put all the different areas together and had a good description, and obviously Jehovah played his part in there, making sure that each one of the divisions had the appropriate things for the tribe. And this was obviously done in the tabernacle. So by being done in the tabernacle, you see that divine presence, and that even though they were drawing lots, God had His part in the drawing of the lots. So, any comments about those verses? Okay, we're going to start another section here, and this is starting with verse 11 and actually going into chapter 19 at the end of the chapter in verse 51. So we're going to start dividing up the inheritance among the remaining tribes. So the first 2.5 tribes to the east, they had already received their land. Then Judah, the primary recipient of Jacob's blessing, and Joseph, the recipient of Jacob's blessing, they had already received their lots. We talked about that back in chapters 15 and 17. So now we're getting to the point where the remaining tribes are going to receive their inheritance. So the first tribe here that's going to receive their inheritance is Benjamin. And this is verses 11 through 28. Now, Benjamin shared its territory boundaries with Judah on the south of Ephraim, right in here. Now, you look at that, that's kind of a small area there, but it's an important area it's for a lot of different reasons. It's east of the Jordan River. It formed one of its borders, and on the west, about halfway up the Mediterranean Sea, and Israel's leaders drew a border that separates Benjamin from Dan over here. So you can see we're kind of in that area right there. And then the towns of Benjamin is listed in verses 21 through 28 and fell basically into two groups. 12 of the towns stood on the eastern part of the territory, and 14 on the west. So let's look at the description here as it's given in Joshua. So let's look at verse 11. And the lot of the tribe of sons of Benjamin came up by their families, And the border of their lot came forth between the sons of Judah and the sons of Joseph. Now, one of the future Benjamites, I guess is what they call themselves, and Paul was Paul. And you look down the line, he was very proud of the fact that he was from the tribe of Benjamin. So that's kind of one of their legacies in the Bible. Now, when they drew these lots, and we talked about this before, there were probably two urns, one which had the name of the 7 tribes, and the other was the name of the portion that they were going to get. So they would draw basically one lot from the first urn, and it would tell which tribe. They drew a second lot from the second urn, and this was assigning the particular area to that tribe. So this was the first lot of the 7 that came up, and it was it was kind of a small lot, and in the Bible they refer to it a lot of times as Little Benjamin, going back to Psalm 68 and 27. But really, even though it's a small piece of land, it's a great piece of land. Very pleasant area, real fruitful, a really good area there. Now Josephus writes about this. He said this lot was very straight because of the goodness of the soil, and it took in Jericho and the city of Jerusalem. So even though it was small, it was a good draw for the tribe of Benjamin. So having Judah to the south and Joseph on the north, it was ordered by the providence of God that Benjamin should lie close to Joseph, being the brothers and the only child of Rachel. So this was talked about a little bit in Deuteronomy 33, chapter 33, verse 7. And it said, "And this for Judah, and he said, Hear Jehovah, the voice of Judah, and bring him to this people, and let his hands be sufficient for him. You shall be helped from his enemies." So basically, this was an area of protection. If you go on reading in this particular chapter, going down to verse 12, it said, "And of Benjamin, the beloved of Jehovah, shall live in safety beside him, and shall cover him all the days long. Yea, he shall dwell between his shoulders." So, this was talked about before that this was going to happen. And by having this location, it was going to be a safe location because you had the different tribes protecting it. Comments, Kevin?
Benjamin, the smallest in number.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it was talking about back in Psalms. It actually says Little Benjamin. Talks about it. Right. But they would also need more protection also. Okay, comments about that verse. All right, so now we're going to look at a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm going to slay a whole bunch of names here as we go through and describe the locations here. Let's start with verse 12. "And their border on the north side was from Jordan, and the border went up to the side of Jericho on the north side and went up through the mountains westward. And their boundaries was at the wilderness of Bethaven, and the border went over from there toward Luz to the side of Luz, which was Bethel, southward. And the border went down to Adar, near the hill that lies on the south side of the lower of Bethron. And the lower border was drawn from there and went around the corner of the sea southward from the hill that is front of Beth Horon southward. And its boundary was at Caudill, and is Caudill, a city of the sons of Judah. This was the western quarter. And the south quarter was from the edge of Kirjath Jearim, and the border went westward and went out of the spring of the waters of Nephthah. And the border went down to the end of the mountain that is before the valley of the sons of Hinnom, and the valley of the giants northward, and went down the valley of Hinnom to the side of Jebusite on the south, and went down in Egro. And it was drawn from the north and went out to Ishmael and west to Geloth, and with across the accent of Adam, and went down to the stone of Boam, the son of Reuben. So all of that description that I just talked about is that little part right there. A lot of moving around there for and to look at.
That's Jerusalem.
Right in there.
And the south of Jerusalem was that valley of Hinnom.
Right.
So you get the picture there.
Right. So this stone that's talked about there was erected in honor of Boam, the son, as one of the boundaries between Judah and Benjamin in the valley of Achor, along the eastern side of the present Wadi Dera. So Boam was a son of Reuben, according to Joshua 15:6 and Joshua 18:17. There's no other really mention of him in the genealogies of Reuben, other than what was revealed to us here in Joshua. So apparently, he had some type of redeeming quality because they erected some type of stone in his honor, some type of memorial, and this was used as one of the cornerstones of the dividing of the land, kind of as a monument. And even to this day, surveyors talk about certain type of rock formations as monuments. And I kind of learned that out at the Browning farm, out in the middle of the field. There's a stone, and that's it's got the little mark on there where it's been surveyed. And when the surveyor wrote out the description, he talked about a monument, and that was that surveying stone. So things that were in the Bible comes all the way through even to today. Comments about those verses?
Sound like these people went out and surveyed the land. They used existing cities and towns as points of interest.
Right. Right.
They used them to guide themselves.
Right. And also, there were some fixed borders of these towns. So, I mean, you can kind of line the thing. I would be interesting to know if they used any type of survey equipment to kind of, if they put markers, and things like. It's not revealed whether they did that or not. Of course, we have no way of knowing. But I would suspect that there was some type of markers.
I don't know what they had with them, but we know that they used such equipment in Egypt. Ancient Egyptians were great engineers and surveyors. How could they build some of the things they did?
Right, and I mean, I'm relatively sure that I've seen somewhere a picture of a transit that they used in Egypt to put up the pyramids. So they'd have to have something to level that stuff up, Okay, other comments about those verses. Well, I'll tell you what, Keith. Let's stop right here, and I'll slay a few more towns next week. And we'll go into another chapter.
One thing that we got to remember: water was key.
Oh, absolutely. So appreciate everybody's attention and comments today.